I never imagined that my life with Max, my golden retriever, would take such an unexpected turn while my husband Daniel was away on yet another business trip. The house always felt heavier when he was gone, this silence. That wasn't just the absence of sound, but something more profound, almost suffocating. I'd grown used to it over the years. His trips were frequent, sometimes lasting days or even weeks. It wasn't that I resented his work. It paid for our cozy suburban life, the sprawling backyard, and the home that often felt too big for just Max and me. Max had been my constant companion for 5 years now, ever since we brought him home as a clumsy, fluffy puppy. Over time, his presence became my anchor. While Daniel worked long hours or travelled, Max was there greeting me with his wagging tail, warm nuzzles, and those soulful eyes that seemed to understand far more than any dog should. That night, though, was different. The kind of night where the weight of the empty house pressed down on me like a physical force. I tried filling the silence with music, the television, even an audiobook, but nothing helped. Dinner was a lonely affair, leftovers, reheated in the microwave, and afterward, I curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. Max sprawled at my feet, staying closer than usual, as if sensing that I needed him more on nights like these. "You're all I've got tonight, huh?" I murmured, my voice barely louder than a whisper. Max responded with a low, contented huff, his tail thumping softly against the floor. The bond we shared had always been special. He wasn't just a pet, though, was a confidant, a presence that filled the gaps left by Daniel's absence. Over time, I'd begun to notice how much I relied on him, how his quiet companionship brought me a comfort I couldn't find anywhere else. It wasn't just his loyalty or gentle nature. It was the way he seemed to truly see me, as if he understood parts of me I didn't know how to share with anyone else. As the evening stretched on, I found myself scrolling aimlessly through my phone, glancing at pictures of friends and their families. Their lives seemed full of noise and chaos, which only made the silence of my own life feel even more profound. Max shifted beside me, resting his head on my lap, and I couldn't help but smile. At least, I wasn't entirely alone. I ran my fingers through his thick golden fur, feeling the warmth of his body against mine. "You're such a good boy," I said softly. His tail wagged in response, and he let out a pleased sigh. Moments like this made me grateful for him, for the uncomplicated love he offered so freely. It wasn't the same as having Daniel here, but it was enough to make the loneliness bearable. Eventually, the wine began to work its magic, softening the edges of my thoughts as I sank deeper into the couch. Max shifted again, curling up beside me in a way that felt like he was trying to shield me from the emptiness of the house. "You know, Max," I said, my voice quieter now, "sometimes I wonder if Daniel even notices how much time he spends away. I mean, I get Ith's busy. He's doing what he has to do, but sometimes I wish he'd just be here." Max's ears twitched, and he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a kind of understanding that made my chest ache. It was ridiculous, I knew, to project my feelings onto him, but in that moment, it felt like he truly understood me in a way no one else did. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Max's tail thumping against the floor. He always seemed to know when I needed an extra push to start the day. His golden eyes peeked over the edge of the bed, and I couldn't help but smile as he let out a low, cheerful bark as if to say, "Good morning, let's get moving." All right, I chuckled, swinging my legs over the side of the bed and scratching his head as he nuzzled against me. After breakfast, Max trotted to the sliding glass door leading to the backyard, his tail wagging in anticipation. I grabbed his leash from the hook by the door, and his excitement grew his whole body, vibrating with energy. A walk was exactly what I needed to clear my mind and shake off the remnants of last night's reflections. The neighborhood was still waking up, the streets quiet except for the occasional chirp of birds and the distant hum of a lawnmower. Max stayed close to my side as we walked, his leash slack, his steps matching mine. It was one of the things I loved most about him, his calm, steady presence, even when the world felt chaotic. As we passed the park, I decided to let him off the leash. He bounded ahead, his ears flopping as he ran. Watching him like that, so free and full of life, always made me feel a little lighter. I sat on a nearby bench, letting the warmth of the sun wash over me as I kept an eye on Max. He was chasing a squirrel now, though his attempts were more playful than serious. "You're ridiculous, you know that," I called out to him, laughing as he turned back toward me, his tail wagging furiously. He trotted over, his tongue lolling out of his mouth, and flopped down at my feet. For a while, we just sat there, soaking in the quiet of the morning. I found myself talking to Max again, as I often did when it was just the two of us. There was something comforting about it, like he was a sounding board for the thoughts I couldn't quite say out loud to anyone else. "I don't know, Max," I began, leaning down to rub his ears. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if things were different? If we weren't stuck in this routine day after day?" He looked up at me with those big, expressive eyes, and I could almost imagine him saying, "I'm listening." By the time we returned home, the day had blurred into a haze of mundane tasks: laundry, cleaning, cooking. But Max followed me from room to room, his presence a constant comfort. That evening, as I sat on the couch, with Max curled up beside me, I realized something had shifted between us. "You're a lifesaver, you know that?" I said softly, trailing my fingers along the soft waves of his coat. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Max responded with a soft sigh, his tail thumping lazily against the couch. I smiled, leaning back and letting myself relax for the first time all day. The warmth of his body against mine was comforting, grounding in a way that nothing else seemed to be. As the night wore on, I found myself reflecting on the bond we shared. It wasn't just loyalty or companionship, though those things were certainly part of it. It was the way Max seemed to see me, to understand me in a way that felt almost human. Later that night, as I lay in bed with Max at my feet, I whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Max, for everything." But as I drifted off to sleep, a thought lingered in my mind that would change everything. What if Max could offer me more than just companionship? What if he could fill the void in ways I hadn't dared to imagine? The next day, as we sat together in the park, I felt an inexplicable puller connection, so strong it left me breathless. Max shifted closer, his warmth seeping into me as I leaned forward, my forehead resting against his. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. Max responded with a soft nuzzle, his nose brushing against my cheek as his tail wagged once more. It was as though he understood us, though he felt the same unspoken bond that had grown between us. And in that moment I realized that what we shared was more than just friendship. It was something deeper, something instinctive. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing for certain: Max would be there, his loyalty unwavering, his love a constant in a world that so often felt unpredictable. As I drifted off to sleep that night, Max curled up beside me. I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't known in years. For the first time, in a long time, I wasn't alone.